You're listening to Reach, Teach, Talk with Nat Dane.
Welcome back to another episode of Reach, Teach, Talk. I have our first ever repeat guest, Drew Kugler, who was with us on episode 4, where we talked about candor. We talked about constructive candor, which was really the idea of what Brene Brown would say as clear is kind, right? Being clear. We all appreciate when people are clear with us, even if we may not be willing to hear that clarity. We know in our hearts that it is, if it is well intentioned and if it is coming from somebody who we believe in and who we believe believes in us, then that constructive candor is absolutely well received and beneficial. So we talked about that. It was an amazing conversation. This was, again, episode 4 of Reach, Teach, Talk. We are now into our 50s. So holy mackerel, 5 years ahead. Let's move ahead now to Reach, Teach, Talk, episode number 51. And again, we have Drew back with us because he's amazing. He is a leadership coach. He is an inspiring public speaker. He is somebody who can truly motivate groups. He's a teacher. He also is somebody who works one-on-one with managers and CEOs, CFOs. He's worked with some of the best known production companies, organizations, again, Fortune 500 companies in Los Angeles and elsewhere all across the US, and also actually in Britain as well, and other areas of Europe. So Drew is with us today because I met up with him a few months ago, and it was just, I can't remember what the function was, but it was just, he was glowing, and I was asking Drew, I was like, why are you glowing? Like, what's going on? And I mean, you're always smiling. You're always like charming and charismatic with a voice like Tom Hanks.
That's me.
That's true. But really, like, what is it that was causing you to glow? And what you said to me was you had a realization, if not even an epiphany, after last summer. And this epiphany is something that Drew broke down for me in the months ensuing. And I was like, God, Drew, would you possibly consider coming back on Reach, Teach, Talk and unveiling really this new concept that absolutely not only causes you to glow from within, but will certainly cause others to glow as well, in teams and ways they work together? Because what you're really introducing here is this topic of leading with love. And we've had love-themed episodes in the past. We had Brian Eady here recently, who created the documentary on love, A Case for Love, in this podcast episode number 44, I think it was, from last year. And we've talked about love in many different permutations, right? Like in terms of leading, and in terms of our relationships with others, relationships with ourselves, this idea of how learning from our mentors and teaching is really based on belief and on this idea of love for what you're teaching, love for the importance of what you're teaching, and love for the people, the students, the mentees who are in your charge and who you are hoping to evolve and grow with you, along with you. And again, this comes from the heart and the mind. It's never strictly cognitive, and it's also never strictly from the heart either, but it is a combination of both. And Drew is going to talk with us today about leading through love, which I also like the idea. It's leading through love, not necessarily with love. There's something kind of about the water here, the energy, it moving through porous layers in a way of connecting. And this is honestly, as you shared with me, this is a new way to develop people. So again, educators in the audience of Reach, Teach, Talk, this is a way to perhaps apply to your classroom management, your classroom efficacy as a teacher, because really at the end of the day, what you're doing as teachers is developing people, developing their way of thinking, developing and shaping their individuality, who they truly are, and their own self-knowledge. So, Drew, I've done enough talking. I'm so excited to have you back. Number 2. Yeah. Again, he's our first number 2. And we're so excited to have you with us on Reach, Teach, Talk. And let's just open it up to you here. Why don't you tell the story from your perspective in terms of how leading through love came about?
Right. Well, thank you again for having me, Nat. And if you were truly transparent with your audience, you would also tell them that it was mostly my idea because of this glow, as you describe it. I am on this journey, a relatively new journey for someone who has been in the business of coaching and teaching for 41 years now. this feels very new and very fresh. And at the same time, it's something as you've referred to, not only have you dealt with it on your podcast, but if you expand that outwards, you can go back obviously in history and the story of love in relationships and in life is a long one. However, what does it have to do with my epiphany and my glow?
Yes.
In 2021, a book was published, which it would be easy to say I recommend it to everybody. I do not get an affiliate credit on Amazon or anything for it, but it's a book called 4,000 Weeks. 4,000 Weeks, written by a columnist in England by the name of Oliver Burkeman. Oliver makes a point that I had never read, and so I found it quite profound in that he was making a very, very sound, if you will, argument or point that we only have so much time. 4,000 weeks refers to the average age that people reach in the world across, especially in the more developed countries. You can pretty much hit about the average gender-wise, everything at around 80 years old. That's why it's called 4,000 weeks.
Is that 4,000 weeks from birth or from
yes,
18 years old?
80 years old.
Okay.
80 years old. Now, please, the book tells it much better than I, but here's the fundamental point that, like I said, I read it 4 years ago, but true of any kind of really profound knowledge, it dawns on you over time. So when Oliver pointed out that it was 4,000 weeks, he pushed that up against the concept, a word, frankly, even in my advanced teaching and age, I'd never heard, and that was finitude. Finitude basically meaning, the nuts and bolts of it is, we're going to die. We're just, that is the one thing we all share. No matter economic status, no matter where you live, anything else, everyone is going to die. The question that Oliver really, in a lovely way, forces in the book is, A, do you accept that in how you think about your living? And if you don't, there are consequences. For example, he would say that people, whether it's my clients or your friends or whatever it is, most people spend enormous amounts of time denying death. Mm-hmm. So they will do things, his contention, they will do things like develop grand plans with huge to-do lists under each plan. They will obviously, in running their business or their life, they will have enormous backlog of email. Well, Oliver's point is that you actually do all that as a means of proving that you're going to live forever. Of the concept that everything is going to be fine. And so therefore the to-do list can be as long as you want it to be. And if you have it, you're alive.
So this idea that if you have a bucket list, right? Like I haven't been to Thailand, I haven't been to, Antarctica, but I will in this lifetime do that. As long as you have those dangling carrots out there, you may convince yourself that you will live until you chop those carrots.
You will make the list of things you want to do while you're alive.
Right.
And at the same time, when you deal rationally and look at the science of finitude,
right,
you may or may not.
Exactly.
And that's what I finally realized. Now, admittedly, I was in the middle of my 60s, and I realized that, as a friend of mine, before, ironically, he passed away, he used a golf analogy, which said, Drew, you got to remember, we're on the back nine. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're playing on the backside.
Is that once you turn 40?
Good question. But Bill, bless his soul, it was a great way for me to start thinking about the same point that Oliver was making, is that what are you doing with what you have? So what I chose to do, here comes the glow. What I chose to do was to not stop my practice of coaching, but to, in essence, carve out deliberate time to, if you will, zoom back from the day-to-day, moment-to-moment grind of talking to clients, of creating new business, of everything that I was doing,
Yeah.
and ask myself a deeper question. The question was, how meaningfully was I, or am I, spending my time, however long it's going to be, how meaningfully am I spending each day? Using the day, because you got your day, right? Pretty much you can count pretty much on the day you're going to get to the end of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I started to use a different measurement. And I started to say, what am I doing with this, whatever amount of finite time that I have, that is going to be, number one, interesting and meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, as is the purpose of my coaching, how can it help others? So
let's get to the coaching part in a second, but I have to interject because you just kind of blew my mind a second ago, because without even knowing it, you know the expression, the days are long, as you get older, the days are long, but the years are short.
Mm-hmm.
How true that feels as you get older, right?
Yes.
The days are long, but the years feel short. Now I'm looking at it differently as of a minute ago. I love this because what you're sharing already is that if we look at every day as being a full, complete day where we can accomplish various things, experience various things, see various things, look up every once in a while, take a pause, meditate, listen, all this stuff that I'm sure we're going to get into in terms of how you apply leading through love. But if you look at every day as an opportunity for that, the day seems vibrant to me. It seems like a mosaic. It seems like a beautiful, like a stained glass window. But the years are short. And this is what you're just teaching me. It's this idea that you got 4,000 weeks. You've got, as you get older, you've got these bucket list things. But there's something about the fact that the years are short, that they feel short, that motivates me in my mind right now, in my heart, to take advantage of that, to appreciate, the time, the limited time that I have. So I had to interject because that quote came right into my head, like the days are long, the years are short. And look at how what you just shared really actually validates and inspires in that quote. So,
well, thank you for turning that in such a helpful way. And again, it makes me think. And I want to add some clarification when you think about what you're doing in your day. When I was talking about a list, I actually, credit goes to Oliver, I'm actually talking about a to-do list of everything that is like on your pad. Everything, all the tasks you have, and you have to walk the dog, and you have to go to the concert, and you have that list because of finitude. And that pile of email, which is on your phone and on your computer at home. What if, and this comes from the acceptance of finitude, what if we put aside those as our main priority to finish, if we actually accept that they will never be finished? And you stop deluding yourself that by spending more time, you're going to somehow, a phrase Oliver uses a lot, clear the decks. That you're going to get a fresh deck to play from. Well, guess what? Deck. You never will. Now, most people, if they accepted that, I mean, really accepted and acted into that, which is what, dare say, I've done, the world completely shifts. Because it allows you then to put aside those things that can drag you down. Email, oh God, I got so many email. I'm so busy. I've got so much to do and all the rest. If you're able to jettison that in favor of what you were just talking about in your realization, and that is think about your day, think about the present, and what is it that is truly the best way to spend that time? Because, and it doesn't take a book to prove it, right this minute of us sitting here is all we have. We don't have tomorrow. We certainly don't have yesterday because it's gone. So then your your meter of thinking about how am I, your filter of how you spending your time becomes necessarily absolutely directed toward daily progress.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing against the 5-year plan, because there's certainly a lot of people who like to work on something like
strategic
that.
plans.
The strategic
Yes.
plans. But guess what? I think the best, and this does come probably from the Eastern thinking, but work on your journey day by day and detach, as they say, from the destination. Work on the journey and you will get where you get. Now, how does this get to the glow? What I decided to do with my daily work was carve out a period of time that allowed me to look back over my 26 years of coaching and look back in a very specific, almost detailed sort of way. And anyone who knows me that I'm even talking about a detail will be laughing. But here's what I did. I intentionally took a list, thanks to our Quicken books at my company, and I looked at all the engagements I've had. We have a list of everybody who's, hired me to do the coaching. And inside
in 26 years,
in
sorry.
26
You looked at
years,
the whole
26
list
years.
back 26 years.
Went back and looked, obviously took some picky moments, but I randomly went and said, what was I talking about there? What was I talking about there? And went through these pages and pages. On top of that, it also gave me a sense that there were thousands of companies that I've touched, been part of, but then even more conversations. And here comes the glow. What I realized as I stepped far enough away back from it, with enough openness and looking for what I call the red thread, is there was something that tied it all together. And I never knew what it was until I looked for it.
And looking back.
You
had to look back in order to discover
what were the topics. What were the needs that people shared with me. And what I realized
is the red thread
was, listen, we should have a drum roll. No, but what it came down to was, it wasn't so much of what they were telling me. The commonality was in how I showed up. And how I showed up was evidenced, or I think best talked about, by a reference made by Dr. Martin Luther King. In 1967, he gave a speech. Now, I had read the speech dozens of times. The speech talks about, the title was literally, Where Do We Go From Here? Because the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was looking for his guidance in all of this racial acrimony that was taking place, in 1967. And Dr. King gives a speech. And he says about a quarter of the way down, and again, here comes the epiphany. He says, I've decided to stick with love. And I had read that line dozens of times. But because of the place I had put myself in, by accepting my finitude, by working into it rather than trying to avoid it, clarity came. You talked about the importance of, Brene Brown talked about having clarity. It then, in an epiphanous way, dawned on me that I work every day, unbeknownst to me until this analysis, that I work every day in the pursuit of what Dr. King defined not only as love, but what he then added adjectives of, which is important when you talk about love. What kind of love? He said it was strong and demanding love, not romantic, not, what he called the emotional bosh of love, but he talked about, can you enter into relationships, especially adverse ones, where there is challenge? He even took it out to hate. And can you love the people who are being hated? That concept said to me, you've got to show up, I now say to clients, you've got to show up at at a higher level, what my dad used to say, take the higher road because it's not very crowded. That is exactly what I'm now overtly, number one, coaching. And number two, something you're familiar with because we've talked about this, we have turned this idea into a piece of curriculum for the Reach Academy for young men this summer. I'm going to be teaching a class to middle school age boys, and oh, don't they need the attention, that basically is called the life skill of strong love, where they're going to look at me on that first day and they're going to think I'm nuts because I'm there to talk to boys about love, and they're going to, as my late mother would say, they're going to itch in their chair, and that's when the fun is going to begin. Because, and then I'll take the next question, but this is so important. If we can plant, even in those 10 boys, for a couple weeks, we can plant in their mind a tool that they can use that elevates people around them, which is what love does, the right kind of love, that elevates people around them in pursuit of spiritual and human growth.
Yep. That's
a good summer. That's the way I'm looking at it. And of course, I'm taking this to my clients too.
This is, what was it? Undemanding love? What was it?
Strong and demanding.
Strong and demanding. Strong and demanding love. And this idea, the framing of you in a classroom with, say, 10 boys this summer, teaching about love, but every moment in there, you're going to be actually demonstrating it. You're going to be practicing what you preach. Because some of those boys are going to be driving you crazy. Totally. And you've got to practice demanding love with them to every single one of them. Yeah. That's different than being demanding. That's different than showing expectations.
And that's,
the word love makes it so human.
It's exactly right. And love in the as instigated, if you will. I'm coming up with the word as delivered.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In the classroom, if you can deliver strong and demanding love, maybe a teacher or 50 are sitting listening to this and say, well, what's an example?
Right.
Right?
Right. Good.
Go back to the topic from episode 4.
Yeah.
Constructive candor.
Yep.
Constructive candor basically saying there is a way to build a conversation around important and challenging issues with other people that can have a constructive, the word build to it, rather than being shut down in a short way because of its tension. That there is a way to have the hard conversation that is actually sustainable over time. That's the notion of constructive candor.
Yes.
Sacrificing in a way that you and the way that you contribute to a conversation like that is a stellar fireworks example of strong and demanding love. You must be strong. You must demand something, not even of the other person, but of yourself.
Totally. Demonstrate
on how you show up. Yep. Because guess what? All that I'm contending to people here, to the kids, to the clients, is this is not about changing other people. You must almost forego the notion of how the other person's going to handle it.
Yep.
It is about you, pull President Lincoln into this, you being your better angel.
Yep.
And showing up in times of difficulty or importance or both, and showing up in a way with having the right conversation. To list a couple more popular ones, how intensely are you listening? Another thing that you've got to be able to do to show up in a strong and demanding way. Are you also finding ways? Third example, I have 20 of them, but the third example is, are you showing up with curiosity? If the person is, going through something or needs some advice, is she actually talking more than you are? That, if you're able to do that and seed the field for them, notice, whether or not they take you up on it, that's up to them.
Right.
But if you are showing up with your better angel, then you have brought strong and demanding love.
Awesome. 2 ears and one mouth.
That's it.
I think it's podcast number 11 or something. Pretty soon after yours, original one was with Graham Bodie, who is a professor. He may still be a professor at Ole Miss. And the whole episode is about listening and the power of listening and listening versus hearing. Or, I hear things, but am I really listening? And part of this strong and demanding love is demanding that the students in your charge are being listened to, and also demanding that they are listening to you.
Exactly.
And and also I'm thinking about the idea of how maintaining the high bar is so important. And that's such a demonstration as well of strong and demanding love, because I'm demanding of you to reach that bar. I'm not going to lower it to make it easier for you. I'm not going to be a crutch, unless obviously there may be some special circumstances where lowering the bar temporarily is important, just to give a student a little modicum of a feeling of accomplishment or something, right? Who may really need it. But overall, generally, right, you keep that bar high, because if you lower it, you're not being demanding, and you're therefore not showing your love. You're instead placating.
Well, especially as a teacher. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
They're taking so much meaning from it's like a parent. They they might not always seem like they're listening, but they're always watching.
Totally,
right?
Totally.
So if you're showing up, one quick note on listening though, because you very articulately put out this very clear and important notion of what it means to listen, right? I've actually added on to that, and it's especially important with this concept of love. These days, because of the way, let's just say, the world has become, that many people believe, there has been a twist added to the way that I talk about listening with clients. I even mentioned this last summer at the Reach Academy to some parents, where we were talking about, of course it's important to listen, but listen with a certain intent. And the intent should be, in the spirit of constructive candor, to perpetuate a conversation, to build it. That is not what is now in many, many, many conversations that I've both seen and read about. That's not what's happening. Someone actually termed it that people are now leaning into a process called predatory listening.
Tell me more.
Tell
us more about predatory listening. This is fascinating.
Because this is so not loving. Yeah. It's the easiest way to think of the opposite. Yes. So you and someone that you disagree with are having a conversation about politics or about religion or about anything. It doesn't have to just be the third rail topics. And what you find yourself doing, since you're the one here, I'll pick on you.
Yeah, go.
What you find yourself doing is listening, because that's just what Nat Damon does. However, you are listening and preparing to attack. So because you're in disagreement, but predatory, attack, right? Go after, seize on. My point is, do you use listening for good, to sustain the conversation, to show respect, even in times of disagreement, even in times, King would have said, of darkness and hate? Or are you going to wait for that other person to finish their point and then jump on them and tell them why they're wrong?
Oh my gosh.
That's predatory listening. Absolutely. And kids, this is what I'm really watching for this summer. We're going to put listening on the board, and I'm going to do my best to at least make the case to them that it's just not sitting and absorbing. It's thinking of how to sustain it in the relationship. Because, as you know, at the end of the day, no matter what we say, no matter what issue we're dealing with, relationships remain paramount in the mental and physical health of every kid. And as the famous Harvard study has found, the older you get, the more important your close relationships are. That takes us back to love. Absolutely. So that's why, Nat, that's why I glowed, because I realized, you know what it was? I realized, number one, that my work had a different purpose. We all talk about that, but mine was made clear. Number two, it gave me a new journey to start, a new path to walk down, that it wasn't so much about little details of little tips and techniques for people. It was about something that not only affects them as, let's say, as a teacher, but it also affects them as as a sibling. It affects them as a parent. It affects them as a friend. So all that I'm saying to anybody thinking about this, once you land on, and this may be something, we can spend a minute on, once you land on what you believe strong and demanding love really is, almost definitionally,
Yep.
and you can use that as your guide,
Yep.
rather than throwing around, which I've seen it thrown around a lot, this word of love.
Yes.
Right? Here in Hollywood, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody loves everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mike, I love him. Yeah, I didn't so much appreciate the way he handled the meeting, but I love him. I love him. Well, that is, you can edit this up, but that's just walking bullshit.
Yeah.
And it completely weakens and cheapens such a historically critical concept. And then the other one that's so important where it gets used, and I would have anybody think about it, is a two-part question. Number one, do you love your work? Right? Do you love your job? Number two, if you do, if you don't, that's another podcast to listen to.
Totally.
But number two, if you do love your work, how is that translating to strengthening relationships? Because if it's not, your love is being wasted.
Squandered.
Absolutely.
Right.
So you're having a good day.
But that's all about
great.
you. It's
That's
not, you're
great.
not
Exactly,
radiating it. You're not
because
glowing like you were.
Exactly, because love is about sacrificing and strengthening others
Yes.
at a larger sense than by your actions, of course,
Yes.
but by giving to others
Yes.
in very simple day-to-day ways.
Yes. And I'm moving this over to the teacher lens, as always. And I'm thinking about so you have the 4,000 weeks. Every school year, you've got between 165 and 185 days, okay, depending on what school district or what type of school you work for. So 185 days is quite a long time. That's a lot of numbers. That's a big number, actually, 185. 165 is a big number, too. And that helps me, though, because it's like, look, you may have squandered your love that day, but the next day you can show it again. Or if you have time to reflect on whether or not you were strong and demanding that class or that day, and if you were, great, keep it going. If you weren't, well, you can pick it up again the next day. Now, and I know that sounds superficial in a sense, because as a teacher, I'm like, yeah, but come on. Like, there's the content, there's the deliverables, there's the curricular expectations, there's the exams coming up in 7 weeks. Like, we've got to prepare for. Yet, I fully believe in what you're preaching here, Drew, because it's a mindset. It's, as you started off saying, you didn't say it's a philosophy, but that's how I interpret what you were saying earlier. This is not tips and tricks.
No.
This is transcendent. This is the idea of the most East Asian part of you I've ever heard, the most Buddhist part I've ever heard of Drew Kugler coming out of you is the focus on the present here, right? Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Yesterday's gone. Right now, the present. And that's, as a teacher, I'm thinking about how that can be a balm. That can be a kind of a saving grace in a sense, because the pressure we put on ourselves as teachers is obviously got to cover the content, got to push through, but you're not going to cover it with depth if you don't have this ability permission to listen truly, keep the bar high truly, be the strong and demanding, loving force in the classroom truly, which means being able to find the power in the pause, being able to take the train off to a different track. If the barometer of the classroom is one way, to be able to adapt to it without scrapping it all, right?
Yeah, I just cannot emphasize what may even end up being a larger point in my thinking, because I'm debating with it on an everyday basis, is that, look, we can sit here and profess the value of love. And you made a very good case for it, the different ways to do it. I talk about the different ways to do it in relationships. You know what? It may just be the world that I have, found myself in, but I don't think a lot of people do it, right? It is in rarefied air where this kind of, we'll say, behavior and mindset occurs. Yeah. So that means we have to accept, if we still believe in the power of the human being to have agency over most of their behavior, here's what we have to accept, is that there is a strong case to be made, and I look forward to doing this in a couple different ways. In a case to be made to not be loving, to reject loving as a strategy, and to make the case that I'm fine. I'm just living my life. I pay my bills. I'm happy how I am. Because you and I are both here talking about a evolutionary move for people to make.
Totally.
And you're right. That's, of course, what I profess and aspire for people, my clients, my family, the people I care about. That's the choice. But guess what? It's not my choice for what those clients are going to do. I simply show up and make the case, and then have enough respect that they get to own their choices. So a lot of people are going to hear this, or they're going to read something I'm going to write, and they're going to go, it's too hard. It's too weird. It's not how I think. Right. And you know what? As my late father-in-law would have said, may they live and be well. I'm not going to try to change those people. I'm simply saying, own your choice. If you don't want to love, if you do not see the value in it, or it scares you too much, which is what I think the real issue here is, then proceed. But as the saying goes, a famous psychiatrist said, we can do whatever we want, you just have to accept the consequences. I think your life is lessened. Of course, I think your life can be advanced with love. But if you do not want to do it, or don't think you can, or it's too weird or soft or whatever, you have that choice. So my work ultimately, to wrap it up for me, my work ultimately respects agency. The fact that you own your agency. Say it. This love thing, Drew, that's nice. You make an okay case, but it's not for me. Then go. Right?
But that's not going to change you and how you have chosen to use that filter. Operate through that lens.
It makes me actually to be able to, as this guy who's mentored me a lot, a guy named Seth Godin, he says at some point you need to shun the non-believer. I respect people who don't agree with me on this, as long as they know that it is about, my glow came from owning my choice. Mm-hmm. That's where it came from.
Yeah, you can only glow from within.
And the question for anyone listening or hearing this anything is, what choice are you making and being aware of and reflective of on a regular basis?
It sounds like making no choice is a choice.
It's like not voting. You're voting when you don't vote.
You're choosing.
Yep.
You're making a choice without making a choice.
So let's just all accept that.
Yeah.
If we all accept that, then we have elevated the conversation.
Because you can't change people. It's so true. And it's the way that also, looking at my students, it's the idea of, I'm not going to change them. I don't want to change them. In fact, their dynamic the classroom dynamic is based on their individuality. Like there's not of course I want to help kids get behave better or make better decisions. But again, that's all guiding process. It's guiding by the side. But more than anything, what I've learned in my many years now in schools and teaching in the classroom is it's really how you present yourself as the adult in the room, right? Mm-hmm. Ted and Nancy Sizer talk about, and you mentioned this, they're always watching. The students are always watching you. And if you're grappling with something with a student, if you've got a student who's always got his arms crossed in the back of the classroom, like just kind of defiant, looking at you, it's up to you as the adult to kind of figure out, well, look, is it really about me? I mean, let me hold the mirror to myself and really think when I'm home, when I've got some time to think, maybe I am doing something that could be triggering this kid. But more than likely, 95% of the time, the kid just didn't have breakfast. The kid has got relationship issues, parents, no parents, transportation, getting to school, doesn't want to be in school, wants to be doing something different with his life. I mean, all of that. You're 16 years old. Everything is changing around you, including what's going on inside of you.
That's right.
So I'm just thinking empathetically here, because so much of what you're talking about demands, I think, an empathetic lens. You're not going to change anybody. You're not. You are not going to say, put a smile on your face, turn the frown upside down. Like nobody buys that stuff, right? Right. Well, maybe I just did put a smile on your face, but it's not my intent. It just happened.
Right.
So knowing that, in a sense, gives you more permission, I think, as a teacher, to be that demanding, warm and demanding. Zaretta Hammond, another former guest on Reach Teach Talk, talked about being the warm demander. And
I love that.
Oh, it's great. And oh my God. And she talks about how like that's what kids really tend to respond to is, oh, she's not lowering the bar, so therefore she believes I can do this. But she's doing it warmly. And warmth isn't about being friends and being all like roll overy.
Nope.
It's warmth comes from something that is impossible to fake.
Well, and the thing I was just thinking about is, we're talking about me and my Buddhist moment. If you look at Buddhism, if you look at Christianity, if you look at Judaism, and I'm sure the list can go on, every single one of them profess an importance for love. It's one of the things now that you can't fake it, to your point. You have to bring a certain warmth to it. As I tell people, I don't think it's that important to be nice. I think it is much more important to work on being kind, because kindness has a depth to it. And that got me on this track to thinking about what's the difference, because some people, I don't want them to think I'm not nice. I want to be liked at work. Well, true, strong, and demanding love is not always about being liked. I think one person who learned that, as so many people did, was Dr. King, right? He did not care about being nice. He cared about creating kindness in the world off this idea of, and warmth cannot be faked either, at least beyond about a minute.
Right. Very good.
Then people find you out.
Very good. Kindness over niceness. And that does remind me of our conversation from a couple of years back, constructive candor and the idea of being, it's kind to be clear, to be, and it's hard, and you're not going to be the nice person anymore, but you may be more deeply respected, certainly as a mentor and as a feedback provider, as a manager. And
at the end of the day, when you're by yourself and you put your head down on your pillow, can you look back? This is back to the notion of the presence.
Excellent.
Can you put your head down at the end of the day and say, I was the better angel?
Yes.
Because I think we can all agree pretty much, without much debate over politics and society, that whether you want to call it darkness, whether you want to call it polarization, whether you want to call it whatever it is, there is this red thread I referred to that we can pull through all of that acrimony and take responsibility for how we're showing up. Certainly there is many, many things on the news and in the popular culture to be angered by.
Yeah.
I would only ask, in the spirit of this idea of showing up in strong and demanding love, is what good is your anger that you feel from what you see on the news? What good is your anger really doing? Now, you feel like it is because you're being an active voice. Well, in actuality, as somebody put it really well, when you start arguing from this point of anger, you're really faced with those choices. And I really like and appreciate this as a dilemma. When you are angered and in debate, where you're really predatory listening, as we were saying, are you trying to make a point or are you trying to make a difference? If you are trying to make a difference, I'll just sum it up by saying that you do with strong and demanding love.
Yeah.
That's what makes the difference.
Yeah.
You want to make a point? Go ahead and yell. Go ahead and interrupt. Go ahead and just continue along that path, which is frankly easier, as we know.
Yes, it
doesn't take much thought.
Yep.
Doesn't take anything. And, that's where I really come down to of why are we showing up to all these conversations?
Right. To make a point or to make a difference.
Point or make a difference.
We're going to leave it on that. I'd love that. Leave us trailing on the idea of this, the juxtaposition between making a point and making a difference. Drew, you're a great writer as well. You're an amazing speaker. You're an incredible team facilitator. You work so well and so effectively and successfully. When you look back on 26 years, by the way, I was just thinking the LA Marathon's coming up in a couple of months. 26 miles, 26 years. I mean,
Jeez.
you have that,
Nice.
that also puts a really cool talk about the red thread. Talk about a perspective on what years add up to? Like you just had a marathon and you're looking ahead and you've looked behind, assessed it, focusing on the present and looking toward the future. And I just love that idea that it was 26 years. Any chance you might write about this? Is there a book brewing in you?
A very good chance. I won't make the people who are listening go through the whole story with me, but let me just say briefly, the reason that I have not written a book is that even as I started many, many times, it just didn't feel that important. It didn't feel worth the blood, sweat, and tears, which even just decent writing demands of you. This does. Yes. So if the shot is there, this is it. Awesome. And we're not going to talk about some new concept, on episode 106 that I'm going to be glowing about, because this is the glow that you're going to see until I stop.
Fantastic, Drew. Well, thank you for leaving me glowing.
Thank you.
I imagine many of our listeners, if not all, are glowing listening to this conversation, having listened to it and learning so much about leading through love and the transcendent effect, that energy of love. It's God, being the strong demander, I just think is amazing. Yep. The strong and demanding love. Center of the classroom, center of the boardroom, center of the family structure, center of your church communities, religious affiliations, all that stuff, political. Being that presence, that loving presence is everything. Yeah. And thank you for this amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Drew. Reach Teach Talks. So happy and so honored to have Drew Kugler back with us. We've got his website and further information on our website, and look him up. And if you like what you see, reach out to Drew Kugler. He is based in LA, but he works everywhere. Talk to you later. Thank you so much for listening to Reach Teach Talk.
You've been listening to Reach Teach Talk with Nat Damon. If you'd like to recommend a guest for a future episode, you can send your suggestion or questions to nat@reachacademics.com.